Hi, my name is Holly, and I'm bringing you a lesson on the carbon cycle, one of Earth's biogeochemical cycles. I want to start by reading a quote from Aldo Leopold. An atom of phosphorus X had marked time in the limestone ledge since the Paleozoic sea covered the land. Time, to an atom locked in a rock, does not pass. The break came when a bur oak root nosed down a crack and began prying and sucking. In the flash of a century, the rock decayed, and X was pulled up and out into the living world of things. He helped build a flower, which became an acorn, which fattened a deer, which fed an Indian, all in a single year. This quote elegantly shows the biogeochemical cycling of elements between physical and biological realms. For example, carbon is one of the most important elements on our Earth. It is present in living and non-living materials, like rocks, oceans, freshwater, and the atmosphere. While Earth is essentially an open system with respect to energy, it is a closed system in terms of matter, meaning the carbon that was initially gathered to form the Earth 4.5 billion years ago is still around. Carbon takes various forms, building the structure and parts of most biological organisms. We use the high energy stored up in coal, oil, and natural gas to fuel our lives. Coal is formed when dead plant matter decays into peat and is heated and pressurized by burial over millions of years. Trees also gobble up the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, resulting in a cycling of CO2 in the seasons between the atmosphere and the biological world. Carbon is a useful player in many chemical reactions due to its ability to make 4 different bonds with other elements. The set of all life-sustaining chemical reactions within an organism is called metabolism. Metabolism serves to break down food to produce energy that we can use to run cellular processes, like transport or building up of chemicals and molecules that our body needs, such as nucleic acids, carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins. And proteins can help to build a cell or to be enzymes themselves to help run those chemical reactions. So today we're going to talk about one of the most important chemical reactions that is universally used on every single organism. And that process is called cellular respiration. Down here, cellular It occurs in an organelle, which is a small part within a cell that you may have heard of. The powerhouse of the cell, the mighty mitochondria. Now, if you take a deep breath in, your body is breathing up all of air, which is made up of about 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, and a little bit of other things, carbon dioxide, argon, and other molecules. Now, when we say respiration, when you respire or you breathe, that's that gross process of your body taking in oxygen. When we talk about cellular respiration, it's talking about the specific chemical reaction that breaks down food, and food in its most simple form of sugar we would call glucose. And glucose is a 6-carbon, C6, H12O6 molecule. This most basic form of sugar is broken down using the help of, you guessed it, oxygen. And when it hits the mitochondria, the glucose and the oxygen together get broken down to produce a really money-making molecule of our bodies, which is called ATP. And ATP is called adenosine triphosphate, and this molecule can move around our cells in order to drive other chemical reactions. Now, how in the world do we get all of the glucose we need to survive? This whole cycle is part of the carbon cycle. And as we know, plants, magical process of photosynthesis. Photo referring to the energy that's pulled in from the sun, synthesis meaning to build. So we rely on plants which have a special center called the chloroplast. Inside the chloroplast, you'll see stacks of membranes called thylakoids, which house the energy-capturing molecule chlorophyll, which captures the sunlight's energy in order to build together specifically 6 molecules of CO2, breaking apart hydrogen dioxide, water, in order to release an electron, which helps drive something called the electron transport chain. Proteins embedded in the membrane create a high hydrogen gradient inside and act as a charged battery, fueling the production of energy-carrying molecules. That energy is used to create bonds with the CO2 to start forming sugars. We can thank these autotrophs for making food out of thin air and powered by the sun. Plants then use this high-energy carbon compound for their own growth, and in turn, heterotrophs eat plants to obtain this energy. For example, this gazelle requires the energy converted by photosynthesis from over 6 acres of grass to sustain its growth. Carbon is also returned back to the atmosphere by detritivores, or animals which feed on dead organic material, and microorganisms, allowing the cycle to continue. Oceans play out this cycling of carbon and have 50 times the amount of dissolved carbon as the atmosphere, thanks to plankton doing photosynthesis by the surface and it being stored in the shells of marine life. The buildup of atmospheric CO2 that has resulted from the burning of fossil fuels is warming Earth. The concentration of CO2 in air trapped in the Antarctic and Greenland ice caps during the last ice age, between 15,000 and 30,000 years ago, was as low as 200 parts per million. During a warming interval of 5,000 years ago, atmospheric CO2 may have been slightly higher than it is today. This long-term record shows that Earth was warmer when CO2 levels were higher and cooler when they were lower. Balloons aren't just for birthday parties. Scientists use these weather balloons to send them up into the sky and retrieve data on the atmosphere, thus being able to confirm that atmospheric CO2 has been on the rise in the last 50 years. As the level of CO2 rises to over 400 molecules for every 1 million molecules of atmosphere, also known as 400 parts per million, the challenge is how to find and remove CO2. Here are a few examples that scientists have been working on. It starts by foregoing fossil fuels, eliminating the burning of coal, oil, and natural gas, which emits roughly 30 gigatons, throwing our carbon cycle out of balance. The normal balance is about 780 gigatons that get absorbed by the environment and 780 gigatons which are released into the environment, creating a closed cycle. Renewables such as wind, solar, geothermal, and hydroelectricity are a solution to providing fuel for our planet without emitting CO2. One solution we're all in control of is consuming less and trying to be more efficient with our use of energy. For example, driving less would decrease the amount of CO2 that each individual person puts into the atmosphere. Burning 1 gallon of gasoline emits 20 pounds of carbon dioxide. Every year, 33 million acres of forest are cut down. Timber harvesting in the tropics alone contributes to 1.5 billion metric tons of carbon being released into the atmosphere. That represents 20% of human-made greenhouse gas emissions and a source that could be avoided relatively easily. Improved agricultural practices, along with paper recycling and forest management, balance the amount of wood taken out with the amount of new trees growing, and could quickly eliminate this significant chunk of emissions. And we can go unplugged. Believe it or not, U.S. citizens spend more money on electricity to power devices when off than when on. This is just a start of a list of ways that we can reduce our CO2 emissions to help keep this carbon cycle in more balance. To review, we learned about the ways that carbon dioxide is moved from the atmosphere into biomass through the process of photosynthesis and released again in cellular respiration, a process that all animals and plants do. Thank you so much for learning with me, and I hope to be able to teach you in the future.